This topic is the rules of commerce. I don't know how many of you guys have used rules or used commerce. I'm guessing there's going to be a mix. So I'll start off doing a brief introduction to rules, how it works, the different parts of rules that make them work, and then kind of go into how you can customize them, how you can build your own, and how it relates to commerce. So my name's Andy Giles. I'm a Drupal consultant. I've got about 10 years of experience building web applications, websites, probably about 5 years of Drupal specific experience. And then within the past 2.5 years doing consulting, I've been pretty much primarily Drupal with a focus on Drupal commerce. So the objective for today is to shrink the learning curve for rules. A lot of people hear about rules, they know rules comes with commerce, they've opened the interface, clicked around, they may or may not really know what's going on, and then a lot of people just say, screw this, I'm going to write it in code because rules is too confusing, I don't understand where my field values are and everything else. So today I want to make sure that you understand how to bring those values into scope and use rules to its optimal potential. So another overview here, we'll have a brief introduction to rules. We'll go over how rules works with commerce. We'll go over how to extend and build your own rules, and then I'll show you some debugging and testing tips so that you can execute the rules, see what happens, see what's not happening maybe when you expect it to. And then after that, I'll go through some real-world examples that I've built on client sites for just specific use cases. So, who knows what rules is? I mean, I've given you a little bit of an introduction, but is there anybody that doesn't know what rules is? Okay, one guy. Well, this is for you. It's basically a user interface for building event-driven functionality. And I'll go through each of the steps so that you understand that, but it's not in code. It can be parts of it, but it's in the Drupal interface. Click through to set up your events, which is the first thing. An event is something that happens and you want to react upon that, right? So I'll give you an example of some Drupal commerce events, like adding it to the cart. That's an event that will get triggered. Then you can grab a hold of that, use the information within that event to either do more events or perform other logic that you need. So the first thing is events. From there, you'll go into conditions. So you want to basically, when that event happens, you say, do I want to continue? It's a Boolean operation, basically. So you want to decide whether or not this rule should continue or it should exit and go on to the next. Let's close that so I don't get heckled on screen here. So yeah, and then the final thing of rules that makes it awesome is the actions. So this is where once you verify that you want your rule to fire, you take the action, you send an email, you create an entity, do other Drupal things, even trigger more rules. So those are the three main principles of rules and how they work. Within that, there is components, and components are basically reusable sets of rules that you can attach to your events and everything else. And I am a strong believer in building everything as a component, and then using like the main rules interface to trigger your first event, and then you have it fire off all of your components after that, instead of trying to build all of your rules logic into the first rule that happens. So that way, you say a node is created. Well, that's your event. From there, you have a component that says, notify subscribers of this node that it's been published, or whatever else, and you attach onto that using the components, which we'll go into in more detail. And one of the hardest things for anybody first learning rules is scope. When you go in to build your rule, you're expecting to be able to read stuff like what product just got added to the cart, or what is the price of that item. And there's two different ways. There's a couple different ways to do it, but the main ways are either ask or tell rules that the entity is of a bundle. So it's a commerce line item, and that bundle is a product line item. As soon as you do that, rules is aware of all of the fields that come along with a product line item. So the price, anything you've added in addition to that, if you have fields on your line item, that as soon as you do that, then rules knows how to access that data, how to read or write from it, and it's a necessity to use rules. Another thing you can do is say entity has field. So if you have an entity type like your line item and you have multiple bundles and a field may or may not exist across all those bundles, you can say, does this entity have this field? Yes. Then rules knows, okay, I have this data, I know what to do with it. And I'll show you when we get to the examples how that works and kind of break it down. So from there, it's kind of the brief introduction into rules, and then how does it work with Commerce? Well, the majority of the workflow in Commerce is dependent upon rules and allows you to intercept things and create your checkout workflows and react to different events. So of those examples, like I mentioned, redirects, you can set order state status based on different things that happen in the checkout process. Pricing rules, you can give discounts based on like a role or some other metadata in your structure that you want to adjust the price of a product for a particular user, or if you want to award wholesale pricing. Shipping rules, all of the shipping interactions within Commerce goes through rules. So all of the requests that go out to UPS, USPS, APIs, all of those things funnel through rules first. So you can set conditions. If it's shipping to North Carolina, don't use FedEx because it's more expensive. So we only want to use USPS for North Carolina shipping, that kind of stuff. Or when that value comes back from UPS, you can add a handling fee to it. So you want to have a $1 or $2 packaging handling fee on top of whatever the rate quote was returned. Payment options, the same thing. All the payment gateways and everything go through rules first. So the availability of those rules can be determined. If they're, again, in North Carolina, you could offer them a local pickup option as opposed to just authorized.net or whatever. You can also set, based on the order total, maybe you get a better deal with PayPal if the order total is over $100 or whatever, so you enable PayPal at that point. From there, Commerce comes with quite a bit of stuff built in, but at some point you're going to hit a wall when you realize that what you need isn't there and you're going to have to write it yourself. And the good thing about that is Rules has an API that's really easy to learn. Basically, I'll go over 3 hooks that you should know. 2 are really important, 1 you may or may not need to use. So the first one is the event info, and this is what triggers the initial event that we talked about. It requires that you define the hook, which I'll show you some code later on so that you can kind of see how these things work. But you must define the hook so that Rules is aware of it, and then your module or somewhere in your code you must call Rules invoke event, and that says, hey Rules, we're ready, go take these variables and do something with them, do your magic, right? That is probably the lesser used of the hooks for customizing stuff. I mean, most of the time with the entity API and everything in Drupal, it's already going to be executing those hooks, like node update, node delete, tons of things are already exposed. So that's why I say that this is usually used a little bit less. This one's very important, hook rules condition info. And basically you're defining a function for rules to call whenever it hits, whenever you add this condition to your rule, it's going to call your function and it needs to return a Boolean operator. So should we move on, should we not? And you can pass it variables and then do your logic in your code to determine yes or no, we shouldn't move on. And so you may be wondering like, well, we're using rules while we're writing code. The benefit of this is you write a condition and you make it extensible so that your client can say, they can build their own rules and it'll execute your condition. So this, I want to give a discount to products that contain the word Drupal, right? And so when you add it to your cart, that condition doesn't exist out of the box with Drupal Commerce. So you write a condition that does a string comparison on the product title, and then from there your customer can then build any number of rules based on their own criteria just using the product title. And and that's where the magic of rules comes in. Once you've decided whether or not to continue with your condition, then you have your actions, and this is where you would define your own actions that may or may not exist in Commerce, or may not be able to do out of the box with rules itself. Does anybody have any questions up to this point about customizing rules or using hooks? Do you know what a hook is? Am I going too fast? Or, everybody's up to speed, it sounds like. Josh knows what's up. All right, so, and again, we'll go over some real world examples, some code, and let you look at this kind of stuff. The next thing we're going to cover is debugging, which is an important part of rules, and knowing what's going on, because a lot of times your rule will execute, or maybe it won't execute, and you don't know why. Or you'll have a series of components. The first rule will fire, and it'll only get 3 components in, and then the whole thing will stop working, and you don't know why. So the first thing out of the box that rules comes with is a debugger that you can just turn on in the settings. So if you open your rules interface, go to the settings tab, under the debugging option, you can say always show the information of what's going on. And I don't know if you can see, it's really small at the bottom, but it'll show you whenever rules fires every event, every condition, and every action, and whether or not they actually happened. Sometimes what they returned, that kind of stuff. So that's the first step. If you're not sure what's going on, what's happening with your rule, definitely turn that on and kind of inspect it. The next thing that's really cool about using components instead of just throwing all this stuff in the first rules page is that components are executable through the user interface. So if you have like an email that goes out to your clients when they complete checkout, or to your customers, you don't want to have to go through, do the whole order process just to test your email, right? So you build one order, however, either through code or through going through checkout, and then you can execute your component, and it's going to automatically know what type of data you're passing. And so in this example, I had a node, and I pass it a node ID, and then it says, okay, there's my component. I have this node in scope now. What am I going to do with it? And so it's a really beneficial way that I think some people are not aware of, that you can even execute these rules just from the UI itself. Let's see, from there we've got devil module. What did you say earlier? If you're not using the devil module, you're the devil. I don't know. Yeah. But anyways, the cool thing about devil module is one of my favorite things is executing PHP, of course, in your development environment at devil/PHP. It's just got a shell that you can throw in code, and it'll execute against the Drupal database. All of your APIs are there. You can pretty much just test your code in that window. Then once you know that it's working, then you can put it in your module and go from there. With rules, if you have a custom rules file, you want to make sure that you load the include file, and then you can just execute your rule directly. So once you have that file in, you load your node or your product or whatever, and you just execute your rule function with that variable right away. So my goal was to go through all that stuff pretty quickly and then get to the real world examples, because I think that's going to be the important part of helping you understand how to build these things. Let's switch gears here a little bit so you can see what I'm seeing. So the first example that I was going to go over is how to add a shipping and handling surcharge to whatever your shipping method is. And so, switch gears here. This is like the easiest rule out of the box that you can do. So by default, Drupal Commerce is going to evoke the calculate a shipping rate event, and that's where it goes, invokes all of the components for any shipping methods you have available, UPS, USPS, and says, hey, go do your work. When that returns, all we have to do is add an amount to the unit price. So here is an example of the customer wants to charge $1 so that they cover their package that they're shipping the goods in. If we edit this component, you'll see we have the commerce line item, so that's brought into scope. And then basically we just say add, it says 100, but it's actually an integer, so it's $1 to that line item. So no matter what shipping service they use, they're automatically going to have $1 added. Pretty straightforward. You can get into more complex situations using the address or any other conditions within rules to decide whether or not you actually want to charge the customer that. So like I said, that's the easiest one. A cooler one to show you is the member discounts or wholesale discounts. So if a Drupal user has a particular role, they can be awarded a lesser price of the item. So if they're a member or whatever, you give them a discount. So to do that, the event that happens is calculating the sale price of the product. And that's another event that comes out of the box with Commerce, and it's by default going to pass you a line item and the product associated with it. So from there, you can bounce through to the order object or whatever's related to those entities to determine whether or not you should act on it. So my conditions here are order owner has role, which is a special condition I wrote. Basically, the customer wanted to give their clients a discount, but they didn't want them to have to log into the site. So once they enter their email address on the order is associated with that email address, and we do a lookup to see if that user is a member. So they're getting their member discount just by putting in their email address. They don't have to log in. So it's like a usability thing to help their conversions and lower their confusion from the members because they don't want to have to log in every time. So I either say either the order owner has role or the user has role. So they are logged in and they do have this role, so we can proceed. These two, entity has field, these are the big things I was talking about, bringing your items into scope. So right now, Drupal knows that it's a line item, but it's not really aware of if it's a product line item or if it has product data or how it should react on it. So I'm telling it, I want to make sure there's a commerce product field on this line item. If not, abort. And then the next thing, we want to make sure that the line item product, now that we brought the product into scope, I'm going to have to click on this so you can see it. So now we have commerce line item. Since I brought the line item type into scope, it knows that it has products associated with it. So I can say, does this product have a member price? And at that point, if it does, the rule is going to continue. And then we also want to say, is that member price field, does it have data in it? So is it different? Should we award them a member price for this particular product? If all those things pass, then at that point, all we have to do is set the unit price of that particular line item to our member discount value. So you'll see we've got our line item. This is like, these are the scope things. Like rules is not going to know field member price and amount and all of these subsidiary fields of this relationship to the line item until you bring those into scope with entity has field. So since I've done that, I can say commerce line item, commerce product, field, member price amount, which is the discounted amount for those members, and then bam, we set the base price of that product to the value. So just as a quick example of that. So right now I'm looking at my shopping cart. I have a $1,300 product. I'm not a member currently, but if I go into this user, click on the member account, save it, and then refresh, you'll see, based on the magic of commerce, everything runs through pricing rules all the way through checkout. So at any time, if they become a member, after adding certain things to their cart, they're now a member, bam, now they have a discount, you can award them that price. So yeah, any questions about member discounts, pricing rules, how that all works? All right, carry on. Another cool thing that I've built is I'm getting more and more complex with the examples. So if you don't understand something or you have a question, definitely stop me, because if you didn't get it, I'm just going to keep going on down the road. So the next example here would be using a price tier. So if you have one product in your cart, you get it for $10. If you have 5 products in your cart, you get it for $5, and so on. So you can build these criteria for whether or not, based on quantity, should they get a discount. And then another thing is, different products have different pricing tiers. So this product may have the 1 through 10 discount with $5 off. This product may have completely different pricing tier. So to solve that problem, I basically created a taxonomy. I created a taxonomy for the discounts, and then since taxonomies are fieldable, I added a field collection so that you could specify a minimum quantity, a maximum quantity, and the discount percentage that comes along with it. So, you buy 1 or 2 items, you're going to pay full price. You buy 3 to 5 items, you're going to get you're going to pay 95% of the total price. So you get a 5% discount. So this is really cool because you can define an unlimited number of these pricing tiers, and then all you have to do is associate that taxonomy term with the product. So when they add that to the cart, it says, hey, I have this taxonomy term. Let's see, does this rule allow me to get a discount? And we'll walk through how it brings all this data into scope and decides whether or not to give them that discount. So now we're back to our calculating the sale price of our product. That's the default event that comes with Commerce. Every time a cart is refreshed, every line item hits this. So we're basically going to say, is the line item type a product? Yes. So we know, it's not a shipping line item. If it was a shipping line item, at that point, bam, we're out of here. We're not going to execute this rule. It's a product line item. So that does 2 things. Make it aware that it's a product item and also bring those field values again into scope. And then we want to check if the, see what field this is. So is the commerce product not empty? So this is kind of a around the way thing. So the condition that comes out of the box in rules is data value empty? So is this field empty? Yes or no? But we want to know, is it not empty? So we reverse the option. So we say, is it empty? But we want to negate that and say, yes, it's not empty. And then again, entity has field. So at this point, we're going to look at the product. This is where the magic comes in again. So our commerce line item, then we've got our product. We want to say, does it have a pricing schedule? So should we attempt to award this pricing schedule? If it doesn't have this field for whatever reason, we're done. We don't want to continue. And then, last but not least, now that we know that it has that field, is that field value empty? So it could be a product that has the option to have a pricing schedule, but the client didn't assign a pricing schedule to it, so we shouldn't continue. So then at that point, we're going to loop through some data values, and I need to get the edit buttons over here. So a loop is another cool thing in Commerce. You're either going to have a single cardinality item, where there can only be one value, or you're going to have an array of sorts. And in rules, that's called a loop, or it's called a list, pardon. And rules gives you the ability to loop over those items. So at this point, we're going to loop over this is a big one here. We're going to loop over from the line item to the product to the pricing schedule field. So this is the field on the product that determines whether or not it has a discount, and then from there all the way into this field, which is actually the taxonomy reference. And so now at this point, I'm going to loop over all the taxonomy terms on that product from the line item, brought all that stuff into scope. Now I can loop over it, and we're going to see if we should apply a discount based on that taxonomy term. So all of this is a basic rule. Like I was telling you, it's not a component. It's just if you go into the rules interface and you add or edit a rule, this is what you see. From there, we're going to execute, I believe, our first component, which is, again, the reusable set of rules or actions or whatever that you want to happen. So I'm going to hop over to that component, and then we'll see where we've got, I hit the wrong button, sorry. What is this resolution, Mike?
645, 480.
Yeah. I thought I had a responsive design here. Kickstart. Anyways, all right. So now we're in the component. We basically have the field collection taxonomy, and at this point we're going to let me refresh my memory here. Oh, all right, right. So we're bringing in, we're checking the quantity. So again, all of these pricing tiered discounts are based on quantity. So we're checking the quantity against the field collection value. So we want to say, is the commerce line item quantity that's in their cart, is it greater than our minimum quantity within this particular taxonomy term field collection value? It's getting really deep here. And then at that point, yes, it is. It's greater than, so they purchase more than 5, so this rule is going to continue. Then we also do the reverse. We want to make sure it's less than the maximum, or there is no maximum. So we're falling in between our 5 to 10 quantity. At that point, we essentially calculate the value of the discount by taking the discount percentage value in that field collection. So remember, it was like a 95, you're going to pay 95% of the price, 5% discount. We take that value and we divide it by 100, and then multiply that by the discount percentage, and finally set that value of the line item. So pretty crazy. See if I can give you an example on this super tiny screen. So right now, this is a typical low, really small, but quantities of 1 to 2 get $100, quantities of 3 to 5, 95, and so on. And I'll show you how I changed that. So I want to give a different discount tier for this particular product. So if I edit the product, we're going to edit the product variation, and then here is our discount taxonomy reference that handles all the magic of this. So we set it to a standard discount schedule. Save. So then hopefully this discount schedule is different. Right, so now you can see we have different quantities. 1 to 2, you get to pay full price. 3 to 11, you get a different price. So just like that, I've assigned a completely different pricing schedule to this product that automatically updates. If somebody had this item in their cart and they refresh their page, this new rule would happen. They would immediately see their discount out of the box, which is pretty dang cool. And then I think I can show you this, what it looks like as the cart. I guess it's responsive if you make your window size the right. Okay. So right now I have one product. If I go to 9, you see it's $100 subtotal. Update it. Now I'm immediately awarded my discount. Now I'm getting it for $97. Very cool. I mean, this is one of my favorite things about Drupal Commerce is the flexibility of these payment rules or pricing rules, and how you can just completely come up with any situation and make it work for the end price that the user pays. Does anybody have questions about how this works? I know there was a lot of different entity references and things to connect and build this, but yeah. Sure.
So this might be a silly question, but it seems like discount schedules would be something that would be built into an e-commerce platform out of the box.
Sure.
So is that, did you build this discount schedule and the application of it in a cart on the fly here to demonstrate it, or is that something you would have to do if you installed Drupal Commerce and you wanted discount schedules? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, if you wanted this discount schedule on a client's site, how would you get it? Do you have to build it from scratch, or is there a pre-made solution in Commerce to do this? And the answer is no. You have to build it from scratch, or have a feature or something that has this built in. Commerce is amazing. People hear about it, they want to use it. If they're not technically oriented, once they get in, sometimes they're lost, because it's made for developers to make awesome e-commerce solutions, and it makes no assumptions about what you're selling, or how you're selling it, or how you're fulfilling it, or whatever. So one of the shortcomings of Commerce is the missing feature set of some of these things, but to make up for that, if you're a developer, you can build these with, basically I did all of this with zero code, just using rules, taxonomies, field collections, and then just wiring it all together. But yeah, very good question. Yes?
What's the purpose of the loop?
The loop, right. Let me go back. I believe I did a loop over, let me backtrack here. So I'm looping over I believe the scheduled discount was multi-valued. That's a good question. So commerce product, then we're on to the taxonomy term. Oh, no, I'm looping over each of the field collections within the taxonomy term. So I've got my line item, I hit my product. From there, I know that this should be a pricing tier discount from the taxonomy, and then that loops through each of these values. So basically, is it between 1 and 2 quantity? Is it between 3 and 5? So each one of these field collections is an entity in itself.
So if you have multiple things that
yeah, so in rules, if it's
is it this, is it this, is it
exactly,
this, then you've got to have a loop.
Yep.
Otherwise, if it's just evaluating one.
Yeah, if it's just one, like if I had on this taxonomy term, I just had, if it's 5, if it's a quantity of 5, give them a $5 discount, then there's not all those conditions. I don't have to loop over that as one value. So yeah, and there's 1,000 different ways with Drupal rules, code, hooks that you can build this out. This is what I came up with, which is pretty extensible for the client. They can launch a new product, build a whole new pricing schedule with them, and then not have to call me. Unfortunately, I'm not getting paid at that point, but I've built them something that's going to keep them moving forward with their project or their site. And then again, you could apply more conditions to this. So if they're a member, if they have the member role, then give them all these pricing tiers, but don't give them to the public. Did you have a question or anybody else? You're good. I don't want to hear your question on this. So cool. So that's pretty much that feature. No more questions. I'm going to move on to the next one. This site is pretty cool. It's Mission Bicycle. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. I would definitely check it out if you're interested in commerce and what it can do. This is a little side note here, if I have internet. Mission Bicycle, you can build your own bike. You can select the frame, the pedals, every component of the bike. You can go through this form, colors, it's amazing. And then you add it to the cart, and from there it basically creates line items of what you selected. So you selected a red frame, and you selected, blue tires or whatever. So no internet. I've got a local instance, thankfully. I wanted to show you guys the bike builder, but I can show you that later. So the first example in their site is conditional payment methods. And let me find that rule. Payment methods. Okay. God, this is killing me. Okay, so if you edit the Drupal Commerce payment, if you enable a payment module or you go to set a payment module up, you're basically given a subset of the rules interface that's just specific to payments. So you can see this site has authorize.net. It has an estimate feature, and it has an external payment. Authorize.net's obvious. That's where the customer puts in the card, it charges their card. Estimate is something this client wanted in particular. If you have a bike, so they sell other stuff, not just bikes. So if you build a bike, they want you to be able to say, I just want an estimate, and that allows you to complete checkout without paying anything. It basically sends you an email, says, here's your bike that you've built. It tells them, hey, this customer's interested in a bike. It's more of a marketing thing. A lot of times people will go in here, build the bike, and they'll abandon it, or they don't, they're like, oh crap, my bike's $1,500, never mind. So at that point, you've lost the sale. This is their method of trying to recapture that sale, or at least, get that customer engaged. And so if we look at the estimate only payment method, you'll see, again, all of these are rules. And so we have the ability to edit the components within them or edit the conditions. Goodness.
So does it not give them the final price until they...
No, it gives them the final price.
Does it not give that to them until after they've run that estimate And then you collected their email and you know.
No, that's another way to approach it, right? Because then they're not getting sticker shock until you have somebody on the phone with them, and then
Right.
you seal the deal. No, I don't. This was something they wanted. Like most of the stuff I build is a client request. I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. We're not going to do that. Or I'm like, yeah, we'll build it. So I'm not sure exactly where they take it from this point, but my example here is just to show you that with the way that everything is driven through rules, you can decide conditionally whether or not that payment method is available. I apologize, my local development environment is crawling. I thought I supercharged
You
it.
want to get my hotspot?
Oh, it's local.
That might be for you.
Oh, no. I need to go to the speed clinic. So while this is loading, hopefully, basically, here we go. So we're going to edit the rule for whether or not this payment method is available just by going to the payment interface within Drupal Commerce. And here you go, we've got our events. So again, that's the first part of rules. An event happens, what do we do now? A condition, should we continue? So basically we're saying, does this order contain a bike? If it contains just pedals, then we're not going to continue. If it contains the product bike, which we've compartmentalized all the different product types within this. We don't just have products, we have, these are accessories, these are bikes, whatever. So basically, if it has a bike, bam, we're going to enable this payment method. So if this condition fails, when the customer gets to checkout, they're not going to see estimate as an option, right? So pretty cool feature. And then from that, we can do really cool stuff because we now know what payment method they used, right? And so let's say if they used authorized.net, we want to send them a standard, paid invoice that has, their payment method, their balance is 0, that kind of stuff. But if they did an estimate, there's still a balance, essentially. We want to provide them different information. We want to say, here's the next steps to moving forward with your bike since you didn't purchase it. And so from here, when my event is completing the checkout process, I have no conditions yet because I want to do everything in components, right? So I could cram everything in here, but then it just gets messy. So if I do components, I got the event that happens, and then I have two component actions or two component rules that decide what to do next. And this is one of the things with rules, like conceptually how you build them. You would think like if you're building this in code, you would just write an if statement, and then if it's this, you would call another function. If it's that, you would call this function, right? Well, in rules, it's kind of reverse. You call both functions, and then they decide if that function should actually happen. And the reason for that is just some of the shortcomings of trying to build procedures in a user interface, and then also making sure that all those values are in scope with each thing, because I could call one component and it could take the scope of the product objects, and then within the same rule I call another component and it takes the scope of the customer object, right? And they both do separate things, but they started from the same event, right? They started when the customer completed checkout, bam, we're going out and we're going to do something. So the first one, which in rules you can just send an email, so one of the actions could be they completed checkout, send an email that says thank you, right? Well, that's all good and well, but there's not a lot of functionality there, not a lot to expand. So if you use the message module, you're basically creating a new entity. And so here we go. If they didn't get an estimate, so this is another one of those reverse things, like did they do it, but we're reversing it because we want the opposite of it. So basically, if they didn't use an estimate, then we're going to assume that they actually paid and completed checkout. So they used authorized.net, PayPal, whatever else. From there, we're going to create a new entity, which is a message entity. We're going to set a data value on that entity of the order. And I'm not going to get too deep into message module. If you guys have questions about it or want to see it in action afterwards, I can show you that. But basically, create a message entity, set the order, and then from there, message knows how to fill out the template for their invoice. Like put the line items here, put the total here, whatever else. And then finally, send message, save entity. So you're going to save it after you've added the field, which actually isn't necessary. Rules handles saving things automatically. And then we're going to send message with message notify. And at that point, it knows, based on the order owner, it knows their email address. Bam, it's going to create that message and send it out. So the other example here is that we want the opposite of that, right? So we want, they're an estimate. So that first component we just fired, it was an estimate purchase. That component didn't execute. So we need to do something else now, right? So at this point, we want to compare and say, did they use the estimate payment method? And if so, the exact same thing, but we're creating a different type of message. We're still passing it the order object and everything else. We're still sending both of those emails out, but now we have two completely separate messages that go out conditionally. Questions? All right. Still got more. Let's see. So we're going to start getting into some code here, I believe. All right, so within that bike builder, this is, the site's down so it doesn't have all the graphics and make it look cool and whatnot, but once you build your bike and you add it to your cart, you basically end up with a cart that has the bike. Sorry about the resolution issues here. So the bike obviously is, you've got a quantity of one, the bike's $999, and then you have all of your add-ons to that bike, so a freewheel hub, or freewheel gear, I guess, a cafe bar, and your frame size is whatever it is, right? So when this project came to me, they basically were just creating a product and then setting all these values on the product and saving a new product in the database. And the problem there is the customer doesn't know, like, well, first of all, they need, certain add-ons may not be $0, right? So we need to be able to show that to the customer. You started with our base bike of $999, but you had an add-on that's an extra $50. So with that, the way it was built, you couldn't show that to the customer. So my solution was, instead of just setting all of those values on the product itself, we're going to create line items for each one, right? And so you've got not only your bike, but your each component. And then the problem here is, well, they're in checkout now. They created their bike, but what if they changed, the quantity of the freewheel to 2, and they just screwed this up? Like, we needed to make it user-friendly. So my solution for that was to use the fieldable line items and have them relational. So this line item has a field that sets it basically as the parent line item, and then all of these other line items are associated with that line item. So if I make any changes, let's say I'm like, screw it, I don't want this bike, I remove it, it knows, bam, where all the line items are gone now, right? And so the cool thing here is rules is what does that. So there's an event called, after removing a product from the cart, right? So you could do anything. You could say, so you could send the customer an email and say, well, if you had their email address at that point, you had this in your cart, are you sure you don't want it? Or, there's tons of opportunities there to recapture sales. So anyways, that event happens, and then I basically wrote a custom rules action that deletes all of the related line items. So I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so the first thing we do here, okay, right, so remember we talked about rules action hook, right? Defining your own actions to happen whenever rules is executing. So what I'm doing, let's see if I can give you guys a better view here. I don't know if you can see this very well, but anyways, I'm defining a rules action called delete related line items. I'm giving it a label, which is what, when you're in the rules interface, that's what you see. I'm giving it a group, so when you're in the rules interface, it's categorized so you know that this is related to actions related to line items. And then I'm setting a parameter, which means I'm going to expect that whenever this is called in rules, that you're going to pass me a line item, right? You're not going to pass me a product, you're not going to pass me anything else. And the cool thing about rules is, when you define this, there's this type here, and rules knows, based on this, whether or not we should show this action, whether it's, when you add the action, whether or not the values you have will go into it, right? So we have a line item, and then basically by default, rules is going to call this, whatever you set the array key as for your action, it's going to call that function. If you don't want to use that value, you can set callbacks. If you look at the API in Drupal.org, there's tons of more options, but this is all I needed. you can set an execution callback. But anyway, so mission builder delete related to line items. So if we look at that, all I had to do was write a function that says delete, sorry. Delete it here. Here we go. So delete related line items. I've got my line item scope in my method here. I set whether or not we should save it to false. With the line item that was deleted, I load the whole order so that I have the rest of the line items that are in that order, and then I loop over those and I call basically delete the line item if it's related to the parent. So a little bit of coding in here, but I just wanted to show you how you define your own actions to happen, right? So with rules, you could probably build this out with components itself. It'd be a lot of components, but you could loop through the values, check to make sure they match. If they do, delete them. But here was simpler just to write out the code. And I've got a couple more. What's the time here? Okay, so we've got 10 minutes or so. I've got one more I'd like to show you, and from there we'll do like 5 minutes of more questions if you have any. Where am I? So one thing that I see a lot is user accounts in Drupal have values like first name, last name, right? Like if somebody registers for your site, you want to probably know their name, right? And so people build out the user entity and they add those fields. But then Commerce sometimes will create that user for you, and the user's not filling out a registration form, they're filling out a Commerce checkout, right? And so we still want to capture their first name and last name. We still want that saved to their user account, even though they're filling this in as their billing address, right? So with rules, really easy. All you do is basically loop through the order data, bring the billing object into scope, grab the first name and last name, and then set those values on the user object. So if we look, okay. So I have my order, basically data comparison. So again, the data comparison entity has field, entity as a bundle. That's how you bring those objects into scope, so rules is aware of it. And so I'm basically I'm saying, is the commerce customer billing type, or is this address that we're looking at, is it a billing address? And if yes, at that point, rules is aware that on the billing address, there's a first name, a last name, street address, all the things that come with a billing address. And then from there, I have all these objects, so I then just associate them with the user account. So I basically user field first name, so that's just a field on the user object. I say, bam, set the first name from the billing address. And so now, Commerce is creating the user account once the checkout's complete, and we're pre-filling those values based on the billing profile. And then when the customer comes in, actually decides to log in, since they didn't create the account, but now they have an account, then they have those values available to them. They don't have to fill it in. If you have like marketing emails or whatever else, you've captured their first and last name through another form, but you've updated the user entity with that information. So that's pretty much all the examples I have. Any questions about this? Yeah.
I got two. In this one right away, is the user still anonymous when you're setting the value?
The user is not anonymous, right? So there's an anonymous user. One of the rules in Commerce is to create a user account. So basically, everything in Commerce is related to the email address, right? So when you check out, it's going to say, here's the email address. Is there a Drupal user that has this email address? Yes, assign it to that user. No, create a new user, right? And all that's going to do is create a user with an email address. It's not going to have a password. And then I'm trying to think what other fields may be set. Really nothing, just the email address and the username. So now we have basically an empty user object, but we have fields on that user. So you could have an address field. So if you had you want their full address on their user profile, then you could just copy the billing profile directly over. Or you could copy, like I did here, just the first and last name to those fields. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And other question was, with the rule that you decided to program,
Yes.
what got you to that decision to write that in PHP and not build a bunch of components?
So a lot of times when you execute actions, if it's not like out of the box entity API stuff like reading or writing field values, or you need to do some other logic, you need to talk to an API or something like that, at that point you're going to have to write code to do that. And you may think like, well, why the hell are you using rules in the first place if you're writing the code? Well, the reason is so that now your customer or some non-technical person that doesn't write code UI, right? And so the one that I showed, it may not have been the best example for putting in code because I think you could do it with components, but it was just quicker to say, you know, this loop through the line items with an entity metadata wrapper, check the values, if they exist, then delete them, right? It's like 5 lines of code versus 4 components or whatever. So that was probably the deciding factor, you know. How many components is it going to take versus how many lines of code? So, yeah. Anything else? All right, very good. I'll be around the after party if you guys want to catch up on any of this, have any questions, have specific use cases. This is like one of the things I really like about commerce and rules is just like, you've got a problem, how can it be solved with rules, right? How can I build you something that you can move into the future with and manage your own logic with? So, yes.
Do you have any type of method to, if the customer screws something up, like revision the rules if they're doing that on their end, or export that into code as they change stuff?
Sure. So usually when I say a customer that has access to edit rules, they're probably a Drupal developer, site builder, right? At that point, they may not be into code, but they at least understand rules a little bit. But yes, you can export this stuff, features, or rules has its own export method. So yeah, you could. I like to definitely export stuff to code. Then you can diff it, pull down the site and compare it, that kind of stuff. Make sure that nobody's overridden it. So, cool. Thanks, everybody.